Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Floyd Freeman adjusted his mechanic's uniform as he walked through the front door of his modest two-story home in suburban Portland. The smell of motor oil still clung to his hands despite the industrial soap at the garage. 23 years of marriage, and Viola still wrinkled her nose when he came home from work. "You're late again," Viola called from the kitchen, not bothering to look up from her phone. At 45, she maintained the same blonde highlights and manicured appearance that had first caught his attention in college. Back then, her vanity had seemed charming. Now it felt like armor against their crumbling marriage. "Sorry, had to finish Mrs. Chen's transmission," Floyd replied, hanging his keys on the hook by the door. He studied his wife's reflection in the hallway mirror, the way her lips curved into a smile at whatever message she was typing. Not the smile she used to give him. Floyd had noticed the changes 6 months ago. The late-night girls' nights that started happening twice a week. The new lingerie he'd glimpsed in the laundry that never made an appearance in their bedroom. The way she'd started working out religiously, claiming she wanted to feel better about herself. Most telling was how she'd become protective of her phone, carrying it everywhere like a lifeline. Floyd remembered the woman who used to leave it charging in the kitchen overnight, who never hesitated to ask him to check her messages when she was driving. "Dinner's in the fridge if you want it," Viola said, finally glancing up. "I'm meeting Patricia and the girls for drinks." Patricia Blanchard, Viola's best friend since college and Floyd's least favorite person. Patricia had been divorced 3 times and seemed to view marriage as a temporary inconvenience between alimony payments. She'd been filling Viola's head with poison for years about finding yourself and not settling for less than you deserve. "Which bar?" Floyd asked casually, moving to the refrigerator. "That new place downtown. Fusion something." The lie rolled off her tongue smoothly. Floyd had driven past Fusion Lounge 20 minutes ago. It was closed for renovations, had been for 2 weeks. Floyd Freeman wasn't just a mechanic. That was simply the identity he'd chosen for the past decade. A quiet life after 20 years in Army Special Operations. His real wealth, accumulated through wise investments and a substantial inheritance from his grandfather's timber business, sat untouched in accounts Viola knew nothing about. She saw the modest house, the old truck, the grease under his fingernails, and assumed she knew everything about her husband. She had no idea that Floyd Freeman owned the building that housed 3 businesses downtown, or that his poker nights were actually meetings with his private investigator and security consultant. She didn't know about the safety deposit box containing evidence of every lie she'd told in the past 6 months, or the detailed surveillance photos of her afternoon visits to the Riverside Motel. Most importantly, she didn't know that Floyd had identified her lover 3 weeks ago, Detective Gary Sellers, a 15-year veteran of the Portland Police Department. Divorced, ambitious, and stupid enough to think he'd found his ticket to a better life with another man's wife. "I'll probably be late," Viola said, grabbing her purse. She was wearing the red dress, the one she claimed made her feel too self-conscious to wear around him anymore. "Drive safe," Floyd replied, his voice carrying the same tired affection it had for months. He watched her leave, noting the extra attention she'd paid to her makeup, the expensive perfume that wasn't meant for an evening with girlfriends. After her car disappeared down the street, Floyd walked to his home office and opened the locked filing cabinet. Inside were detailed reports from Isaac Combs, the private investigator he'd hired. Photos, credit card records, hotel receipts, text message logs from Viola's phone, easily obtained when she'd asked him to take it for repairs last month. The evidence painted a clear picture. His wife was planning to file for divorce after their upcoming wedding anniversary cruise, timing it to maximize her settlement. She'd already consulted with a lawyer, already started moving money from their joint accounts to her personal savings. Gary Sellers was more than just her lover. He was her exit strategy. A cop with a pension, a man she thought could provide the lifestyle she craved without the embarrassment of being married to a mechanic. Floyd spread the photos across his desk. Viola and Gary at expensive restaurants, their hands intertwined across candlelit tables. The 2 of them entering and leaving hotels in neighboring cities. Gary's patrol car parked outside their house on afternoons when Floyd was supposedly at work. But the most damning photo was from last week. Viola and Gary at a real estate office, looking at listings for condos in Seattle. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Floyd had seen enough combat to know the value of patience, of letting your enemy reveal their full plan before striking. He'd also learned that the most effective attacks came from directions the enemy never saw coming. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Jared Sanford speaking. It's Floyd. Are we still on for next weekend? Jared Sanford was Floyd's oldest friend, a retired Marine colonel who now worked as a security consultant for wealthy individuals who needed problems solved quietly and efficiently. They'd served together in Afghanistan, where Jared had earned the nickname the Surgeon for his precise and devastating tactical planning. Absolutely. The boat's fueled and ready. Your wife's still planning to join us for the anniversary cruise. She wouldn't miss it, Floyd replied, studying a photo of Viola laughing at something Gary had whispered in her ear. 23 years of marriage deserves a proper celebration. Floyd had 1 week to finalize his preparations. 1 week before his cheating wife and her corrupt lover discovered that Floyd Freeman wasn't the simple, trusting mechanic they thought they were manipulating. He was going to give them the performance of a lifetime, and then he was going to destroy them both. Chapter 2. The Setup. Floyd spent Monday morning at the garage as usual, but his mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes, he'd check his phone for updates from Isaac Combs. The private investigator had been monitoring Gary Sellers' patrol routes and radio communications for the past week, building a detailed profile of the corrupt cop's habits and vulnerabilities. You seem distracted today, said Antonio Morgan, Floyd's business partner and the only person who knew about his real financial situation. Antonio managed the books for Freeman Auto Repair, which was actually a highly profitable operation despite its modest appearance. Floyd preferred to keep a low profile. It made people underestimate him. Anniversary's coming up, Floyd replied, tightening a bolt on the engine block in front of him. 23 years. Antonio nodded knowingly. He'd watched Floyd's marriage deteriorate over the past year, though he didn't know the full extent of Viola's betrayal. You and Viola doing anything special? Taking the yacht out for a long weekend. Just the two of us. Floyd's yacht was moored at a private marina under his grandfather's company name, another asset Viola knew nothing about. She thought they were borrowing Jared's boat. At 2:30 p.m., Floyd's phone buzzed with a text from Isaac. Package delivered. Target acquired. Floyd smiled. The package was a carefully crafted piece of bait, a fake insurance investigation into a supposed hit-and-run accident involving Gary Sellers' patrol car. The investigation didn't exist, but the paperwork looked authentic enough to panic a dirty cop who'd been using his position to cover up off-duty activities. Floyd closed the garage early and drove to his real office, a nondescript building downtown where he managed his various investments. His assistant, Grace Starr, had been fielding calls all day from the law firm representing Viola in their upcoming divorce. Mrs. Freeman's attorney called 3 more times, Grace reported. They want to schedule a meeting about amicable asset division for next month. Tell them I'm available anytime after the anniversary cruise, Floyd replied. I want to give my wife the celebration she deserves first. Grace, who'd been managing Floyd's affairs for 5 years, knew better than to ask questions. She'd seen him execute business strategies that left his competitors wondering what had hit them. Floyd Freeman was the kind of man who played chess while others played checkers. That evening, Floyd arrived home to find Viola in an unusually good mood. She was humming while cooking dinner. Actually cooking, not reheating something from the freezer. You seem happy, Floyd observed, accepting the glass of wine she offered. Patricia got promoted to regional manager, Viola said, beaming. We're celebrating tonight. Another lie. Patricia worked part-time at a boutique and hadn't received a promotion in years. But Floyd nodded and smiled, playing his part in their elaborate deception. That's wonderful. You should take her somewhere nice. We thought we'd try that new steakhouse on Fifth Avenue. The same restaurant where she'd been meeting Gary Sellers twice a week, according to Isaac's surveillance reports. After Viola left for her celebration, Floyd made a series of phone calls. The first was to Morris Kramer, a federal prosecutor who owed Floyd a favor from their Army days. The second was to Zach Tuttle, a journalist who specialized in exposing police corruption. The third was to a contact in Seattle who would ensure that Gary Sellers' planned job transfer got delayed indefinitely. Floyd was building a web of consequences that would tighten around his targets gradually, each strand invisible until the trap was fully sprung. Wednesday brought an unexpected development. Floyd was under the hood of a Ford Explorer when he heard familiar voices in the garage's customer waiting area. He peered through the service bay window and saw Gary Sellers standing next to Viola, both of them laughing about something. They'd grown bold, or perhaps they were simply stupid. "Honey," Viola called out. "Look who stopped by, Detective Sellers. He needs his patrol car looked at." Floyd wiped his hands on a rag and walked out to meet them, suppressing the urge to smile at the irony. Gary Sellers was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from years of people deferring to his badge. He was also exactly the type of man Viola had always claimed to find brutish and unappealing. "Detective," Floyd said, extending a grease-stained hand. "What can I do for you?" Gary shook hands with the contemptuous tolerance of a man greeting someone he considered beneath him. "Transmission's been acting up. Your wife says you're the best mechanic in town." "She's biased," Floyd replied modestly. "But I'll take a look. When do you need it back?" "End of the week would be perfect. I've got some time off coming up." Gary's eyes flicked to Viola as he said this, a moment of shared meaning that they thought Floyd missed. Floyd scheduled the appointment and watched them leave together, Viola claiming she needed to run errands and would catch a ride with Gary. Through the window, he saw them embrace in the parking lot, Gary's hands lingering on his wife's waist with possessive familiarity. That evening, Floyd examined Gary's patrol car with professional interest. Hidden among the legitimate maintenance issues was a wealth of intelligence. The car's computer system contained GPS logs showing regular stops at motels and restaurants during shift hours. The glove compartment held receipts and personal items that painted a picture of a cop who'd been living beyond his means for years. Most interesting was what Floyd found hidden behind the radio, a small recording device. Gary Sellers had been documenting his interactions with suspects and fellow officers, likely as insurance against future problems. The device contained dozens of recordings, including conversations that would end careers and possibly lead to criminal charges. Floyd carefully copied everything before making the mechanical repairs. Gary Sellers had just handed him enough ammunition to destroy not only the detective's career, but also several of his colleagues. The corrupt cop had been building his own insurance policy without realizing he was creating someone else's weapon. Friday afternoon, Gary returned to pick up his car. He seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone and looking over his shoulder. "Everything all right, Detective?" Floyd asked, handing over the keys. "Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is." Gary's attempt at casual conversation fell flat. Floyd had noticed the man's increasing paranoia over the past few days, the result of the fake insurance investigation and several other carefully planned rumors about internal affairs scrutiny. "I'm sure it'll blow over," Floyd said sympathetically. "These things usually do." After Gary left, Floyd called Isaac Combs. "How's our friend holding up?" "He's rattled. Been making calls to lawyers all week. Word is he's considering early retirement." "Excellent. And my wife?" "Still planning to file divorce papers next Monday. Her lawyers already prepared the asset seizure documents." Floyd nodded. Viola and Gary thought they were being clever, timing the divorce filing for the day after the anniversary cruise when Floyd would be emotionally vulnerable and financially unprepared. They had no idea they were walking into the most carefully orchestrated trap of their lives. "One more week," Floyd said. "Then we show them what real planning looks like." As he locked up the garage, Floyd felt the familiar calm that had always preceded his most important missions. Everything was falling into place exactly as he designed it. Viola and Gary Sellers had made the mistake of underestimating a man they thought they knew. They were about to learn that Floyd Freeman's greatest talent wasn't fixing engines. It was fixing problems. Permanently. Chapter 3. The Traffic Stop. Saturday afternoon, Floyd and Viola were driving to the marina for their anniversary cruise departure. Viola sat in the passenger seat of Floyd's pickup truck, checking her phone obsessively while maintaining the pretense of excited anticipation. "I can't believe it's been 23 years, she said, not looking up from her screen. "Time really flies." Floyd glanced at his wife, noting the expensive jewelry she was wearing, pieces he'd never seen before. "It does. Till death do us part," Viola murmured, finally putting her phone down. There was something in her tone that made Floyd's jaw tighten. She was already rehearsing her goodbye speech. They were 5 miles from the marina when the flashing lights appeared in Floyd's rearview mirror. He pulled over as a patrol car settled in behind them, exactly as he'd arranged. Gary Sellers approached the driver's side window with theatrical authority, his hand resting on his service weapon. Floyd rolled down the window and looked up at the man who'd been sleeping with his wife for 6 months. "License and registration," Gary commanded, his voice carrying the aggressive edge of a cop looking for trouble. Floyd reached slowly for his wallet, playing the part of the nervous citizen. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Detective," Gary corrected sharply. "Detective Sellers, you were speeding." It was a lie. Floyd had been driving exactly the speed limit, as confirmed by the GPS tracker in his truck. But Gary wasn't interested in traffic violations. This stop was part of the plan he and Viola had hatched to humiliate Floyd before the divorce papers were served. "I'm taking your car, your house, and your wife, soldier," Gary said, his voice low and threatening. He'd obviously done his homework, finding out about Floyd's military service and using it to demean him. From the passenger seat, Viola's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Honey, this coward soldier might shit in his pants if you threaten him like this." The words hit Floyd like a physical blow. This wasn't just adultery, it was calculated cruelty. Viola had shared intimate details about his PTSD struggles with her lover, turning his vulnerabilities into weapons against him. Gary reached for his handcuffs, clearly intending to arrest Floyd on fabricated charges. "Step out of the vehicle. You're under arrest for..." "For what?" Floyd asked quietly, his military training keeping his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Gary leaned closer to the window, his breath carrying the scent of alcohol and arrogance. "For being a pathetic loser who can't satisfy his wife." That was the moment Floyd Freeman decided that quick, clean revenge wasn't enough. These two deserved something far more creative and devastating. "You have no idea who I really am," Floyd said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made Gary step back instinctively. Floyd slowly reached into his jacket pocket, watching Gary's hand move toward his weapon. Instead of a gun, Floyd produced a small digital recorder and a manila envelope. "What the hell is that?" Gary demanded. Floyd pressed play on the recorder. Gary's voice filled the air, clear and unmistakable. "Yeah, I can make those evidence bags disappear for the right price. Just make sure the cash is unmarked." Gary's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "From your patrol car," Floyd replied calmly. "Interesting recording setup you had behind the radio. Very thorough documentation of your criminal activities." Floyd opened the manila envelope and handed Gary a photograph. It showed the detective accepting an envelope from a known drug dealer outside a downtown warehouse. "You see, Detective Sellers, I'm not just a mechanic. I'm also a concerned citizen who's been investigating police corruption in our fair city. Your relationship with my wife was just a bonus discovery." Viola snatched the photo from Gary's trembling hands. "What is this?" "Gary, what's he talking about?" "Nothing," Gary said quickly. "He's bluffing." Floyd produced another recording device. This time, it was Viola's voice. "Gary's going to arrest him on fake charges during the traffic stop. By the time he gets out of jail, I'll have filed for divorce and cleaned out the accounts. He'll never see it coming." The blood drained from Viola's face. "How did you?" "Your phone," Floyd explained patiently. "You really should be more careful about security updates. Amazing what modern surveillance software can do." Gary's hand was shaking as he reached for his radio. Floyd held up a third device, a police band radio transmitter. "I wouldn't call for backup if I were you. Your fellow officers are currently being briefed by internal affairs about your little side business. Apparently, Someone sent them a very detailed file about missing evidence and suspicious financial deposits. The trap was closing exactly as Floyd had planned. Gary and Viola stood frozen in disbelief as their carefully orchestrated scheme collapsed around them. "Here's what's going to happen," Floyd continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. "Detective Sellers, you're going to return to your patrol car and drive away. In exactly 1 hour, you're going to receive a call from your captain informing you that you're suspended pending investigation." Gary started to protest, but Floyd cut him off with a raised hand. "Viola, you're going to continue with our anniversary cruise as planned. We have so much to celebrate, after all. I'm not going anywhere with you," Viola said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. Floyd smiled, a cold, predatory expression that Viola had never seen before. "Yes, you are. Because if you don't, Detective Sellers here will be arrested within the hour on federal conspiracy charges. Your recorded conversations constitute evidence of conspiracy to commit extortion and filing false police reports." Gary's career and freedom hung in the balance, and Viola's face showed she understood the implications. They were trapped, caught in a web of their own making. "How long have you known?" Viola whispered. 6 months, Floyd replied. "Since the first hotel receipt. Did you really think I wouldn't notice my wife falling in love with another man? I've been watching you lie to me every single day." The casual cruelty in his voice made Viola step backward. This wasn't the gentle, understanding husband she'd been deceiving. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous. "Get back in the truck," Floyd commanded. "We have a cruise to catch." As they drove away, leaving Gary Sellers standing beside his patrol car with his career in ruins, Viola finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She'd underestimated her husband catastrophically, mistaking his patience for weakness and his kindness for stupidity. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Floyd glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "We're going to have the anniversary celebration you deserve, dear. Just the two of us on the open ocean, far from any distractions." The yacht waited at the marina, sleek and expensive, nothing like the borrowed boat Viola had been expecting. As they boarded, she realized with growing horror that there were many things about her husband she'd never known, and she was about to discover just how dangerous those secrets could be. Chapter 4: Open Waters. The yacht Retribution cut through the Pacific swells with mechanical precision, its twin engines carrying Floyd and Viola 20 miles offshore into international waters. Viola stood at the stern rail, watching the Oregon coastline disappear into evening mist, her earlier defiance replaced by growing unease. "Whose boat is this really?" she asked, taking in the expensive fixtures and professional-grade navigation equipment. "Mine," Floyd replied from the helm, his hands steady on the wheel. "Has been for 8 years. I bought it after the Wilson Timber acquisition went through." Viola turned sharply. "What acquisition?" "You work at a garage." "On the garage, along with the building it's in, and 2 others downtown. The Wilson Timber deal was my grandfather's company. I inherited it when he passed, then sold it to a development consortium for $34 million. The words hit Viola like physical blows. "That's impossible. Our bank statements show exactly what I wanted you to see." "Viola, you've been married to a multi-millionaire for 15 years and never noticed because you only saw what you expected to see." Floyd engaged the autopilot and turned to face his wife. In the yacht's dim lighting, his expression was unreadable, but something in his posture reminded Viola of the soldier he'd once been. "Why?" she whispered. "Why hide it?" "Because I learned early that money changes people. It makes them greedy, manipulative, willing to destroy relationships for personal gain." Floyd's voice carried no emotion, which made his words more chilling than anger would have. "I wanted to know who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer but love and loyalty." Viola's phone had no signal this far offshore. She was alone with a man she was beginning to realize she'd never truly known, on a boat she couldn't operate, surrounded by miles of dark ocean. "I want to go back," she said. "I'm sure you do, but we have so much to discuss first." Floyd moved to the boat's communications panel and switched on the marine radio. We're going to talk about your plans with Detective Sellers. About the divorce papers you've already had prepared. About the money you've been transferring to accounts I'm not supposed to know about. Floyd had spent the week meticulously documenting Viola's financial betrayal. The joint accounts she'd been systematically draining. The credit cards she'd opened in both their names to fund her affair. The consultation with her divorce attorney about hiding assets and maximizing her settlement. I know about the Seattle condo you and Gary picked out, Floyd continued. The one you planned to buy with money from our divorce settlement. I know about his transfer application to the Seattle Police Department, the one that's been mysteriously delayed by his new criminal investigation. Viola sank into one of the yacht's cushioned seats, the full scope of her situation becoming clear. You planned all of this. I planned for every contingency. 20 years in special operations teaches you to think several moves ahead. Floyd checked their position on the GPS display. We're now in international waters, where certain inconvenient laws about recording conversations and evidence collection don't apply. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Floyd had maneuvered them beyond the reach of immediate rescue or legal intervention. What do you want? Viola asked. I want you to understand something important, Floyd replied, settling into the captain's chair with military bearing. You spent 6 months thinking you were cleverer than me, planning my humiliation with a corrupt cop who saw you as his meal ticket, laughing about my supposed weaknesses with a man who sells evidence to criminals. Floyd produced a tablet computer and turned it toward Viola. The screen showed a series of photographs. Gary Sellers accepting money from drug dealers, meeting with known criminals, falsifying police reports. Your boyfriend isn't just corrupt. He's been running a protection racket for the Carlisle drug operation. Those missing evidence bags? Gary's been selling drugs back to dealers and taking cuts from their territorial disputes. Viola stared at the images in disbelief. That's not. Gary said he was clean. He said he was going to make detective captain, that we'd have a good life together. Gary Sellers has been under federal investigation for 8 months. The Bureau was building a case when I provided them with the additional evidence from his patrol car recordings. By now, he's either in custody or he's run. Floyd switched to another screen showing police radio transcripts. Gary Sellers had been arrested at 6:47 p.m., approximately 1 hour after the traffic stop, on charges of conspiracy, drug trafficking, and racketeering. His criminal network was being systematically dismantled as they spoke. You tied your future to a criminal who was already doomed, Floyd said. Your knight in shining armor was actually a corrupt cop about to spend the next 20 years in federal prison. The revelation shattered Viola's remaining composure. Her affair hadn't been a romantic escape. It had been a catastrophic error in judgment that would have destroyed her life even without Floyd's intervention. But you knew, she said accusingly. You knew what he was, and you let me. I'll let you reveal your true character, Floyd interrupted. I wanted to see how far you'd go, how cruel you could be to someone who'd loved you unconditionally for 23 years. Floyd stood and moved to the yacht's wine storage, retrieving a bottle of champagne, their wedding vintage, saved for special occasions. The traffic stop was particularly illuminating, he continued, popping the cork with practiced ease. Calling me a coward soldier who might shit his pants was a nice touch. Very romantic, sharing my PTSD struggles with your lover so he could use them against me. Viola flinched at her words being repeated back to her. In a moment, caught up in the excitement of their deception, she'd felt powerful and vindicated. Now, alone with Floyd in the middle of the ocean, those words felt like the cruelest thing she'd ever said. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, you're not. You're frightened, which is different. Floyd poured 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to his wife. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry your plan failed. Sorry you chose the wrong man to betray me with. But you're not sorry for the betrayal itself. The accusation hung between them like a physical presence. Viola wanted to deny it, to claim that some part of her had always loved Floyd, but they both knew it would be another lie. What happens now? She asked. Floyd raised a champagne glass in a mock toast. Now we celebrate, darling. 23 years of marriage, and I finally know exactly who I was married to. As the yacht continued into the darkness, Surrounded by empty ocean and endless night sky, Viola began to understand that Floyd's revenge was far from over. The traffic stop had been just the beginning, a public humiliation to set the stage for something much more devastating. She was trapped on a boat with a man whose capacity for patience and planning she'd completely misjudged. And she was beginning to suspect that Floyd Freeman had no intention of letting her leave this yet the same person who'd boarded it. The celebration was just beginning. Chapter 5. Revelations at Sea. Dawn broke over the Pacific as Floyd piloted the yacht toward a small, uninhabited island 25 miles from the mainland. Viola had spent the night in the main cabin, sleepless and trapped with her thoughts while Floyd maintained his vigil at the helm. She emerged to find breakfast prepared, fresh coffee, eggs Benedict, and fruit arranged with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of either hospitality or mockery. Floyd stood at the galley counter, immaculate despite having been awake all night. "You seem tired," he observed. "Difficulty sleeping?" Viola accepted the coffee, but ignored the food. "Where are we going?" "Sanctuary Island. It's private property, belonged to my grandfather, now belongs to me. Perfect place for important conversations without interruption." The island appeared on the horizon, rocky and tree-covered, with a small natural harbor and what looked like a substantial cabin nestled among the pines. As they approached, Viola noticed solar panels, a communication tower, and other signs of modern infrastructure. "How many properties do you own?" she asked. "Enough." Floyd guided the yacht expertly into the harbor, where a floating dock extended into deep water. "My grandfather was more than a timber baron. He was a businessman who understood the value of discretion and preparation." As they tied off at the dock, Floyd's phone chimed with an incoming message. He read it silently, his expression revealing nothing. "Good news," he announced. Detective Sellers was formally charged this morning with 17 felony counts. His bail was denied due to flight risk concerns. Viola felt sick. "You destroyed him." Gary Sellers destroyed himself. "I simply provided documentation of crimes he'd already committed." Floyd shouldered a day pack and gestured toward the island's trail system. "He made his choices just like you made yours." The cabin was larger than it had appeared from the water, a 3-story structure with expansive windows and modern amenities. Inside, Viola found a living space that spoke of wealth and taste, with original artwork and handcrafted furniture that belonged in a magazine. Floyd activated a wall-mounted display screen, which immediately showed a live feed of multiple camera angles. Some showed the cabin's exterior, others displayed various mainland locations. "Full surveillance system," Floyd explained. "I like to know what's happening in my world." One camera feed made Viola gasp. It showed the exterior of her divorce attorney's office, where several unmarked federal vehicles were parked. "What's happening there?" "Arnold Bass is being arrested for embezzling client funds and money laundering. Turns out he's been using divorce settlements to hide proceeds from various criminal enterprises." Floyd switched to another camera. "Your consultation fees helped fund a drug distribution network." Viola stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's not possible. Arnold was recommended by Patricia. Patricia Blanchard is also being arrested today at her boutique. She's been running a high-end prostitution service for wealthy clients, using divorce proceedings to identify targets and gather blackmail material." The revelation hit Viola like a physical blow. Her best friend, her attorney, her lover, everyone she trusted in her betrayal of Floyd had been involved in criminal activities. Floyd pulled up additional camera feeds showing simultaneous arrests across the city. It was a coordinated federal operation targeting what appeared to be an extensive criminal network. "How is this possible?" Viola whispered. "When you started planning your divorce, you thought you were being clever by consulting with Arnold Bass instead of a mainstream family law firm. What you didn't know was that Bass specialized in helping criminals hide assets through fraudulent divorces and custody arrangements." Floyd moved to a well-stocked bar and poured himself a whiskey, his movements casual despite the magnitude of the revelations. Patricia's boutique was a front for money laundering and procurement of services for wealthy clients. When she introduced you to Arnold, you became part of a criminal conspiracy, whether you knew it or not. Viola sank into a leather chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Floyd's orchestration. You knew about all of this? I discovered it during my investigation into your affair. Your choice of co-conspirators led me to a much larger criminal network than I'd initially realized. Floyd sat across from her, his expression almost conversational. The federal government has been very grateful for my assistance. The implication was clear. Floyd hadn't just documented his wife's betrayal. He'd uncovered and helped dismantle an entire criminal organization. His personal revenge had become a federal law enforcement operation. Gary, Patricia, Arnold, they're all facing serious prison time. Your affair helped me map their entire network and provide evidence for their prosecution. Viola's carefully constructed plan was revealed as something much darker and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. She hadn't been planning a simple divorce. She'd been associating with criminals who would have eventually implicated her in their activities. "What about me?" she asked quietly. Floyd studied her for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "That depends on you." He activated another display screen, this one showing financial records. "Your divorce plan involved claiming that I'd hidden assets and demanding a settlement based on the lifestyle you thought you deserved. In reality, you were positioning yourself to receive money that would have been traced back to criminal enterprises." Floyd showed her document after document. Money transfers, property records, financial projections that painted a picture of inadvertent but extensive involvement in money laundering. The federal prosecutors could charge you as part of the conspiracy. Your recorded conversations with Patricia and Arnold, your financial activities, your relationship with Gary Sellers. It all supports a case for knowing participation in criminal activities. The threat hung in the air between them. Floyd held Viola's freedom in his hands, just as he'd held Gary Sellers' career and Patricia's criminal enterprise. "What do you want?" Viola asked again, her voice barely audible. Floyd finished his whiskey and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "I want you to understand that your betrayal had consequences you never considered. You didn't just cheat on your husband. You aligned yourself with criminals who would have destroyed your life eventually." He stood and moved to the cabin's main window, which offered a panoramic view of the empty ocean. "I want you to realize that everything you thought you knew about power, about manipulation, about getting what you want, all of it was amateur hour compared to what real planning looks like." Floyd turned back to face his wife, and for the first time since the traffic stop, his expression showed genuine emotion, a cold, calculating anger that made Viola understand how dangerous her situation had become. "Most of all, I want you to know that Floyd Freeman, the simple mechanic you thought you could humiliate and discard, has the power to give you everything you deserve." The emphasis on the final word carried a promise that made Viola's blood run cold. She was beginning to understand that her husband's revenge was far more sophisticated and devastating than anything she could have imagined. And they were still only halfway through what Floyd had planned for their anniversary celebration. Chapter 6, The Weight of Truth. Floyd led Viola to a second-floor study that served as a command center for his various operations. Wall-mounted monitors displayed financial markets, security camera feeds, and encrypted communication channels. A massive oak desk held multiple laptops and communication devices that spoke of serious business conducted in secret. "Sit down," Floyd commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Viola settled into a chair facing the desk, her earlier defiance replaced by growing fear. The man before her was a stranger, methodical, prepared, and clearly capable of orchestrating events on a scale she couldn't comprehend. Floyd activated a secure video conference connection. The screen displayed a conference room where several people in federal agent attire sat around a polished table. "Mr. Freeman," said a stern woman in her 50s, "thank you for the additional intelligence package. The arrests are proceeding as planned." "My pleasure, Agent Richards. How many targets have been secured?" 17 arrests in 5 cities. The Blanchard-based network was more extensive than we initially realized. Your wife's involvement provided the final pieces we needed to map their money laundering operation. Viola felt the room spinning around her. These weren't just casual federal contacts. Floyd was an active intelligence asset working with the Bureau to dismantle criminal networks. What's Mrs. Freeman's status? Agent Richards asked. Floyd glanced at Viola before responding. She's cooperating fully with our debriefing. I expect to have complete documentation of her involvement within 24 hours. Excellent. We'll need her formal statement for the prosecution files. After ending the call, Floyd turned to face his wife. 20 years in Army Special Operations, Viola. Do you think I just came home and became a mechanic? That I forgot everything I learned about intelligence, gathering, and strategic planning? Viola's voice was barely a whisper. What are you? I'm a consultant. Governments, corporations, private individuals. They all have problems that require unconventional solutions. The garage is my cover, but my real work involves solving problems that can't be handled through normal channels. Floyd opened a wall safe and retrieved a thick folder marked with federal classification codes. Your affair led me to a criminal network that had been operating for 8 years. Patricia Blanchard wasn't just laundering money. She was facilitating human trafficking, drug distribution, and political corruption. He spread photographs across the desk showing Patricia meeting with known criminals, Arnold Bass transferring large sums of money, and Gary Sellers participating in what appeared to be complex criminal transactions. Gary Sellers wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was the network's law enforcement protection. His arrest will lead to the exposure of dozen more corrupt officials across 3 states. The scope of the criminal enterprise Floyd had uncovered through investigating his wife's betrayal was staggering. What had started as personal surveillance had evolved into a federal operation that would make headlines for months. You used me, Viola said, finally understanding the full extent of her situation. You used yourself, Floyd corrected. Every choice you made, every person you trusted, every lie you told, all of it led you deeper into a criminal conspiracy that would have destroyed you with or without my involvement. Floyd showed her recorded conversations between Patricia and Arnold discussing how to manipulate divorce settlements to hide criminal proceeds. Viola's voice appeared in several recordings, unknowingly providing information that helped facilitate money laundering. Patricia was grooming you, Viola. Your marriage to a supposedly simple mechanic made you perfect for their needs. A respectable woman with access to joint assets and no apparent sophistication about financial crimes. The revelation was devastating. Viola had thought she was manipulating others, but she'd been the one being manipulated from the beginning. They planned to use your divorce to move $15 million in criminal proceeds through asset division and property transfers. You would have been their unknowing accomplice until the federal investigation exposed everything. Floyd brought up financial projections showing how Viola's divorce settlement would have been structured to hide money for the criminal network. Her signature would have been on documents that constituted evidence of money laundering and conspiracy. Without my intervention, you would have faced federal charges alongside Patricia and Arnold. Your affair with Gary Sellers would have been evidence of your knowing participation in the conspiracy. Viola stared at the documents that outlined her inadvertent journey toward federal prosecution. Everything she'd thought was her plan had actually been someone else's manipulation. So you saved me? She asked. Floyd's laugh was cold and humorless. I saved myself from the embarrassment of being married to a federal defendant. Your fate was never my primary concern. He activated another monitor showing live news coverage of the arrests. Patricia Blanchard was being led away in handcuffs while reporters described the scope of the criminal network. Arnold Bass was shown entering a federal courthouse under heavy security. By tomorrow, everyone will know that Patricia Blanchard operated a criminal enterprise that used divorce proceedings to hide illegal proceeds. Your association with her will be scrutinized by every federal agency involved in the investigation. Floyd's revenge was more sophisticated than simple exposure. He'd positioned Viola to face potential federal prosecution while simultaneously providing himself as the hero who'd uncovered the criminal network. What happens to me now? Viola asked. Floyd checked his watch with the precision of someone operating on a strict timeline. That depends on your cooperation with the federal investigation. Agent Richards will need detailed statements about your interactions with Patricia, Arnold, and Gary. Complete honesty will determine whether you're charged as a conspirator or classified as an unwitting victim. The threat was clear. Viola's freedom depended on her complete submission to Floyd's orchestrated version of events. He held the evidence that could either exonerate or condemn her. "And our marriage?" she whispered. Floyd's expression showed no emotion whatsoever. "Our marriage ended 6 months ago when you decided to betray me with a corrupt cop. Everything since then has been documentation and consequence management." He stood and moved toward the door. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide how cooperative you want to be with federal investigators. I suggest you use the time to consider your options carefully." As Floyd left the study, Viola remained alone with the monitors showing the destruction of everyone she trusted in her betrayal. Her affair had led her into a web of criminality that would have destroyed her life, and only her husband's intervention had provided a path to survival. But survival would come at a cost that was becoming increasingly clear: complete surrender to Floyd Freeman's will and acceptance of whatever punishment he deemed appropriate for her betrayal. The anniversary celebration was far from over, and Viola was beginning to understand that Floyd's mercy might be more terrifying than his revenge. Chapter 7. The Price of Betrayal. The island's communication room buzzed with encrypted transmissions as Floyd coordinated the final phases of his operation. 3 large monitors displayed real-time feeds from federal operations across multiple cities, while secure phone lines carried conversations with law enforcement officials he'd been working with for months. Viola stood at the window overlooking the harbor, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. The weather seemed appropriate for what was unfolding. A perfect storm of consequences for choices she'd made without understanding their true implications. "Agent Richards wants to conduct your interview via secure video conference in 1 hour, Floyd announced, ending a call with federal prosecutors. "I suggest you prepare carefully." "What am I supposed to say?" Viola asked without turning around. "The truth, though I realize that a foreign concept for you." Floyd's words carried the same cold precision he'd maintained since the traffic stop. But now Viola could hear something else underneath, a finality that suggested their relationship had moved beyond anger into something far more permanent. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" Floyd continued, settling behind the communications desk. 23 years of believing I'd married someone with integrity and honor. 23 years of trusting someone who was apparently capable of casual cruelty and calculated betrayal. He pulled up surveillance footage on one of the monitors, recordings from their own home showing Viola's conversations with Patricia, Gary, and Arnold. The audio was crystal clear, capturing every lie, every moment of contempt, every plan to humiliate and financially destroy the man who'd loved her. "This is what I discovered when I finally started paying attention to who you really are," Floyd said, advancing through the recordings. "Watch yourself, Viola. Listen to your own voice discussing how to maximize damage to someone who'd never been anything but faithful to you." The footage was damning. Viola saw herself laughing about Floyd's supposed naivety, planning his public humiliation, discussing how to hide assets and manipulate the divorce proceedings for maximum financial advantage. "The woman in these recordings isn't someone I recognize," Floyd continued. "She's cruel, manipulative, and completely without conscience. She takes pleasure in planning the destruction of someone who trusted her completely." Floyd advanced to recordings from the previous week, showing Viola and Gary Sellers in intimate conversations about their future together. The casual way they discussed disposing of Floyd's life and feelings was particularly devastating. Gary thought he was getting a wealthy widow, Floyd observed. "You thought you were getting security and status. Neither of you bothered to consider the human cost of your deception." The monitors chimed with incoming federal updates. Gary Sellers had been formally indicted on 23 federal charges. Patricia Blanchard's criminal network had been valued at over $40 million in illegal proceeds. Arnold Bass was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Your lover is facing life in federal prison," Floyd reported. "Your best friend will likely receive 25 years. Your attorney is hoping for 15 years in exchange for testimony against his co-conspirators." Each update represented another strand of Viola's carefully constructed deception unraveling completely. Everyone she trusted, everyone she conspired with, everyone who'd made her feel clever and powerful, all of them were facing serious prison time. "What about me?" Viola asked again. Floyd turned to face her directly, his expression unreadable. "You're going to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. You're going to provide detailed testimony about Patricia's recruitment of you, Arnold's manipulation of your divorce planning, and Gary's criminal activities. And then you're going to disappear." The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Floyd's tone suggested this wasn't a request or negotiation. It was a statement of fact. "I don't understand." Floyd activated another monitor, showing legal documents that had been prepared weeks in advance. Divorce papers, filed this morning in federal court. Asset division based on complete financial disclosure of my actual worth. Viola stared at the documents that dissolved their marriage with surgical precision. Floyd had prepared everything in advance, timing the filing to coincide with the federal arrests. "You'll receive a settlement of $50,000, enough to start over somewhere else, but nothing approaching what you'd plan to steal through your fraudulent divorce proceedings." The settlement was insulting compared to what Viola had expected from a multimillionaire, but given her legal exposure in the federal investigation, she had no leverage to negotiate. "You're also going to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about our marriage, my business activities, and anything you've learned about my actual circumstances." Floyd produced additional documents, restraining orders, contact prohibitions, and legal agreements that would effectively erase Viola from his life permanently. "If you violate any aspect of these agreements, federal prosecutors will receive evidence of your knowing participation in the criminal conspiracy." The choice between $50,000 and federal prison should be relatively simple. Viola realized that Floyd's revenge was perfectly calibrated, not just to punish her betrayal, but to ensure she could never threaten or embarrass him again. She would leave their marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back and enough money to relocate somewhere far from his life. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my concern. You'll have 48 hours after signing these documents to collect personal belongings from the house. After that, any attempt to contact me or approach my property will result in immediate arrest." Floyd's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Agent Richards, ready to conduct Viola's federal interview. "Remember," Floyd said as he activated the video conference connection, "complete honesty about your interactions with the criminal network. Any attempt to minimize your involvement or protect your co-conspirators will be considered obstruction of justice." As Agent Richards appeared on screen, prepared to document Viola's testimony about the criminal conspiracy she'd inadvertently joined, Viola finally understood the full scope of Floyd Freeman's capabilities. He hadn't just discovered her betrayal and documented her affair. He had used her treachery to uncover and dismantle an extensive criminal network, positioning himself as a federal asset, while simultaneously destroying everyone who'd helped her plan his humiliation. The man she'd underestimated as a simple mechanic had orchestrated a revenge so complete and devastating that she would spend the rest of her life understanding its implications. And the most terrifying aspect was Floyd's absolute calm throughout the entire process, as if destroying lives and unraveling criminal conspiracies was simply another day's work for someone with his particular skills and resources. Chapter 8. Federal Testimony. The secure video conference with Agent Richards lasted 3 hours. Viola sat rigidly in front of the camera while federal prosecutors methodically documented her interactions with Patricia Blanchard, Arnold Bass, and Gary Sellers. Floyd remained present throughout, occasionally prompting Viola when her memory seemed conveniently selective. "Mrs. Freeman, let's review your conversation with Patricia Blanchard on March 15th, Agent Richards said, consulting her notes. "You discussed methods for hiding marital assets from your husband during divorce proceedings." Viola glanced at Floyd before responding. Patricia said there were ways to make assets appear smaller than they actually were. She recommended Arnold Bass as someone who specialized in complex divorce cases. Did Ms. Blanchard mention that these methods might involve illegal activities? "No," Viola said quickly, then caught Floyd's warning look. I mean, she mentioned that Arnold was creative with financial documentation, but she never said anything about illegal activities. Agent Richards displayed recorded conversations that contradicted Viola's testimony. Patricia's voice was clear. Arnold knows how to make money disappear and reappear in ways that courts can't trace. It's not exactly legal, but it's effective. Would you like to revise your statement, Mrs. Freeman? The next 2 hours followed the same pattern. Viola attempting to minimize her knowledge and involvement, only to be confronted with recorded evidence that proved her awareness of illegal activities. Floyd had documented everything with the thoroughness of a professional intelligence operation. Let's discuss Detective Sellers. Agent Richards continued. Were you aware of his criminal activities? Gary never discussed police business with me, Viola insisted. Floyd leaned forward and spoke for the first time during the interview. Agent Richards, I believe surveillance recording 847C might be relevant here. The recording that played showed Gary Sellers explaining to Viola how he could manipulate evidence and arrest records to protect their relationship. Viola's voice responded with clear understanding and approval of his criminal capabilities. Mrs. Freeman, Agent Richards said coldly, lying to federal investigators is a felony offense. I strongly suggest you reconsider your approach to this interview. By the end of the session, Viola had provided testimony that thoroughly documented her awareness of the criminal conspiracy while positioning her as a manipulated victim rather than a willing participant. It was a delicate balance that Floyd had clearly orchestrated in advance. After the video conference ended, Agent Richards remained on screen for a private consultation with Floyd. Mr. Freeman, based on Mrs. Freeman's testimony and the evidence you provided, we're prepared to offer her immunity from prosecution in exchange for her continued cooperation. That's generous, Floyd replied. I trust she'll be available for additional interviews as needed? Absolutely. We'll also need her testimony for the trials of Blanchard, Bass, and Sellers. After ending the federal call, Floyd turned to address Viola directly. Congratulations. You've avoided federal prison by providing testimony against your co-conspirators. Viola felt no relief. The immunity came with conditions that effectively placed her under federal oversight indefinitely. She would be monitored, restricted in her movements, and required to testify in multiple criminal trials over the coming months. What happens now, she asked. Floyd handed her a tablet displaying legal documents that had been prepared during her federal interview. Now you sign the divorce settlement and start a new life. The documents were comprehensive and brutal. Viola would receive $50,000 and be required to relocate at least 500 miles from Floyd's residence. She was prohibited from discussing their marriage, Floyd's business activities, or any aspect of the federal investigation. I can't survive on $50,000, Viola protested. You should have considered that before betraying me with a corrupt cop, Floyd replied without emotion. The alternative is federal prison, so I suggest you adjust your expectations accordingly. Viola read through the settlement documents, looking for any leverage or room for negotiation. There was none. Floyd had anticipated every possible objection and closed every legal loophole. The house, my belongings. You have 48 hours to collect personal items. Everything else stays with me, including the car you've been driving, the jewelry I purchased, and the credit cards in my name. Floyd's revenge was designed to leave Viola with nothing but the legal minimum required to avoid charges of abandonment. She would start over with less money than most people spend on a used car. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my concern. I suggest you choose carefully. The federal monitoring requirements mean you'll need to notify authorities of any address changes for the next 5 years. Floyd stood and moved toward the cabin's main door, clearly considering their conversation finished. A helicopter will arrive tomorrow morning to return you to the mainland. I suggest you use tonight to consider the life choices that brought you to this moment. As Floyd prepared to leave, Viola made one final attempt to salvage something from their relationship. 23 years of marriage has to mean something. Floyd paused at the door, his back still turned to her. 23 years means I wasted the best years of my life on someone who is apparently capable of breathtaking cruelty when she thought she could get away with it. He turned to face her one final time, his expression completely devoid of the warmth or affection she'd taken for granted for over 2 decades. The woman I married would never have mocked my PTSD struggles with her lover. She would never have planned my public humiliation or conspired to steal from me. That woman either never existed, or you killed her sometime over the past few years. Floyd's words carried a finality that made Viola understand their marriage was truly over. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances, no possibility of earning forgiveness. I've arranged for you to spend tonight in the guest quarters. Tomorrow morning, you'll sign the documents, board the helicopter, and begin whatever life you can build with the consequences of your choices. As Floyd left the cabin, Viola remained alone with the legal documents that would finalize her exile from the life she tried to manipulate and control. Outside, storm clouds continued gathering over the Pacific, bringing weather that seemed appropriate for the destruction of everything she'd once taken for granted. The anniversary cruise was nearly over, and Viola was beginning to understand that Floyd Freeman's revenge had been more devastating than simple punishment. It had been complete erasure from the life they'd built together. Tomorrow, she would discover just how thoroughly Floyd had anticipated and prepared for every aspect of her new existence as a divorced woman with no resources, no allies, and no way back to the world she'd lost through her own betrayal. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months later, Floyd Freeman stood in the renovated study of his Portland home, reviewing architectural plans for a new wing that would expand his private office space. The house felt different without Viola's presence, quieter, more focused, arranged according to his preferences rather than the compromises that had defined their shared life. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Agent Richards. Blanchard trial concluded. 25 years federal prison. Bass received 18 years. Sellers sentenced to life without parole for conspiracy and murder of a federal witness. Floyd deleted the message and returned to his plans. The criminal network he'd helped dismantle had been larger and more dangerous than anyone initially realized. Gary Sellers had killed a potential witness during the investigation, earning him a sentence that ensured he'd never threaten anyone again. The garage below continued operating as his public front, but Floyd's real work had expanded considerably. Federal agencies now regularly consulted him on cases involving organized crime and corruption. His reputation as someone who could uncover criminal networks had led to contracts across the country. Graystar knocked on the study door. "Mr. Freeman, there's someone here to see you. I'm not expecting anyone." She says she's Viola Freeman. Former Viola Freeman. Floyd felt no surprise, only the mild irritation of dealing with a problem he'd thought was resolved. "Send her up." Viola appeared in the doorway, looking dramatically different from the woman he divorced. Her hair was shorter and darker. Her clothes were clearly inexpensive, and she carried herself with the defeated posture of someone who'd learned hard lessons about consequences. "Hello, Floyd. It's Mr. Freeman. We're not on a first-name basis anymore." Floyd didn't invite her to sit. "What do you want?" "I wanted to see you. To talk about. You're violating the contact prohibition in our divorce agreement. I could have you arrested." Viola stepped into the study, looking around at the renovations and improvements. "I know. I needed to see what I lost." Floyd observed her with the clinical detachment he might show an interesting but dangerous specimen. "You look like you're struggling." "I'm struggling. $50,000 doesn't last long when you're starting over at 45 with no job skills and a federal monitoring requirement." "Where are you living?" "Portland. I got a job at a call center, renting a studio apartment in Southeast. It's not much, but it's what I can afford." Floyd noted that she'd chosen to stay in the same city despite the restraining order requirements. Viola had always been drawn to familiar territory, even when it was dangerous for her. "Why are you really here?" he asked. Viola's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "Because I made a terrible mistake. Because I threw away the best thing in my life for nothing. Because I hurt someone I loved in ways I can't take back." "And you want what, forgiveness? Reconciliation?" "I want you to know that I understand what I lost, that I know who you really are now, and I realize how stupid I was to think I could manipulate someone like you." Floyd moved to his desk, and opened a locked drawer, retrieving a manila folder. You want to know what you lost? Let me show you. He spread photographs across the desk. Images of his expanded business operations, properties she'd never known about, investments worth millions of dollars. There were also photos of Floyd with federal officials, receiving commendations for his assistance in dismantling criminal networks. "This is who you were married to," Floyd said. "Someone who could have given you anything you wanted if you'd been honest about what you needed. Instead, you chose to conspire with criminals and plan my humiliation." Viola stared at the evidence of a life she'd thrown away. "I know. I was stupid and cruel and—" "You were exactly who you chose to be," Floyd interrupted. "Everything you did came from choices you made freely, understanding the potential consequences." Floyd gathered the photographs and returned them to the folder. Gary Sellers died in federal prison 3 weeks ago, killed by inmates who discovered he was a corrupt cop. Patricia Blanchard has lost 2 appeals and will spend the rest of her life in prison. Arnold Bass committed suicide rather than face his sentence. The words hit Viola like physical blows. Everyone she'd conspired with was either dead or permanently imprisoned, while she struggled to survive on the margins of the life she'd once taken for granted. "You destroyed them all," she whispered. "They destroyed themselves through criminal activities that would have been exposed with or without my involvement. I simply provided documentation of crimes they'd already committed." Floyd moved toward the door, clearly ending their conversation. "You should leave now. Any further contact will result in your arrest for violating the restraining order." "Floyd, please." "Mr. Freeman," he corrected coldly. "And the answer is no to whatever you're going to ask. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, no financial assistance, no second chances. You made your choices, and now you live with the consequences." Viola stood frozen in the doorway, realizing that Floyd Freeman was truly lost to her forever. The man she'd once manipulated and betrayed had become someone completely beyond her reach or influence. "I loved you," she said desperately. Floyd's expression didn't change. "No, you loved what you thought I could provide for you. When you decided I wasn't enough, you looked for something better without considering the cost of your betrayal. I made a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices over 6 months. Every lie, every secret meeting, every moment of planning my humiliation. Those were choices that revealed who you really are." Floyd opened the study door wider, clearly waiting for her to leave. Viola Freeman died the day she decided to betray her husband with a corrupt cop. "I don't know who you are now, but you're not someone I have any interest in knowing." As Viola left the house for the final time, Floyd returned to his architectural plans. The new wing would include expanded security systems and a private conference room for his federal consulting work. The house would become exactly what he wanted it to be, arranged according to his preferences without the compromises that had defined his married life. His phone rang, Grace announcing that Agent Richards was calling about a new case involving political corruption in Seattle. Floyd's expertise was increasingly in demand, his reputation as someone who could unravel complex criminal conspiracies growing with each successful operation. Floyd Freeman had emerged from his marriage stronger, wealthier, and more powerful than before. His wife's betrayal had led him to discover capabilities and resources he'd never fully utilized. Her attempt to destroy him had instead transformed him into someone far more dangerous and effective than the simple mechanic she'd thought she was manipulating. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Portland, but Floyd felt only satisfaction as he began planning his next operation. Viola Freeman had taught him valuable lessons about trust, betrayal, and the importance of thorough preparation. He would never make the mistake of underestimating an enemy again, and he would never forgive anyone who betrayed him. The anniversary celebration was finally over, and Floyd Freeman had won completely.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.